I have one more tool to add to your tool belt when it comes to factoring. 241. What? No. Why would you ask? Okay, so we're going to talk about what's called factoring by grouping. And this is something that is going to help us Okay, this is something that's going to help us when we have 4 terms. So we've been factoring a lot of trinomials. There are 3 terms. But today I'm going to show you what's called factoring by grouping. And this is something that is going to help us if we have 4 terms. Now, it's not the have all be all. It's not going to work every single time when we have 4 terms, but it's going to with the one. What? Okay. So this is what I want you to write down. I'm going to show you how it works. Okay. Factoring by grouping takes into account a GCF. So I would like you to write down x cubed minus 4x squared plus 16x minus 64.
There's a lot of fours.
Yeah.
What's with all 4s? I think that's the common factor.
Is there a GCF for all 4 terms?
Yes.
No.
Oh, my thunder. Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm not factoring out a 1.
No. 3.
There would be. You guys, there is not a GCF for all 4 terms. You can stop. Thank you. Because this term doesn't have an X. So X is not a GCF. This term is not a multiple of 4. So 4 is not a GCF. But if you have 4 terms, then I want you to that's not a hash, that's just an asterisk. I want you to split in the middle. It's an asterisk. It's like a little star. It's just, I'm just keeping it safe. So I want you to look at the first 2 terms, and I want us to identify a GCF of just the first 2. Is there a GCF of these 2 terms? Yes. Colin?
X squared.
It is x squared. So I'm going to factor out an x squared, and what would be left?
4.
How about x minus 4?
Yeah, that works.
Right? If I divide out x squared, here I get x. Here I get minus 4. Now, what about here? 16. So a positive 16. And when I factor out a positive 16 from here, I'm left with x. And here I'm left with
Interesting. Wow. Interesting.
I see a pattern.
it has to be like that for this to work. These two right here have to be the same. If they're not, then this strategy is not going to help us. So what I highlighted in yellow, that's a GCF. This blob right here and this blob both have an x minus 4. So what we're going to do is we are going to factor out that x minus 4, and left over is x squared plus 16.
If that didn't work, then what we do?
If that didn't work, we can't use that strategy.
Okay.
We can't factor it.
What would you do instead?
So in algebra 2, you'll learn a strategy when factoring doesn't work.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you things that factor. Okay?
That's after geometry.
Yep.
We'll forget all this by then.
Oh, I promise you it'll come back.
No.
Stop. Okay, turn the page. Turn the page. We're going to look at number 1. How many terms are there? Is there a GCF for all 4? Okay. So we're going to try this whole factoring by grouping thing. So I'm going to split this down the middle. I'm looking at these first 2. What's our GCF? B squared.
Oh,
B2, the same bingo.
Okay. Preston, I'll give you a chance for redemption. What's left over when we factor out B squared?
minus 4.
Okay. Now let's look at the second 2. So there technically isn't a GCF, but we need to write it like there is. So since they don't have anything in common, we are going to factor out a +1 because we need these 2 sets of parentheses to be the same in order for this to work. So since we now have 2 chunks, both with a common factor of b minus 4, we're going to factor out b minus 4, and then left over is b squared plus 1.
Wow.
This is one of my favorite factoring methods.
It's right there.
I think it's great. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we just got to practice. So here, let's look at number 2. Number 2, we have 4 terms. Let's split them in half. Okay. What is the GCF of the first 2? Just A. And left over, we have C plus D. So what do those have in common? B. So we're going to factor out a B, and left over is, no way, C plus D. No. Since we now have created 2 chunks with a GCF of C plus D, we can factor out the GCF of C plus D And left over, we have a plus b.
Let's do it. Pretty weird though.
Other one here. I would like you to try number 4. Yes. We are trying number 4. Check in with your elbow partner to make sure that you have the same thing.
I don't know what grades to send. No, I did not. I don't we did the same thing. We did the same.
So of the first two, what's in common?
I don't know. Oh.
Yeah, you do.
No, I know. T2, T squared.
T squared. Okay, so write T squared.
That doesn't mean.
When Avery's back.
Kevin?
Kevin?
That was pretty self-sure.
Oh, my bad. No, I'm not like that.
Not a question. Okay.
He knows it was you.
Okay. All right, what's our GCF of what I highlighted in green? What is it, Abby? So what's the GCF to factor out here to get 5t? So t squared and left is 5t plus 6. What are we going to factor out of the second chunk? Just a 1. Left over is 5t plus 6. So since now we have this in common, we can factor out the GCF of 5t plus 6, and left over is t squared plus 1. Wow. I love it. I love it.
Good deal.
Why do you not? We could ask the same thing. Okay. All right. Number 5. Before you start getting crazy on number 5, what do you need to do? Oh, who said that? Elliot says we need to order it. What does he mean by that, Carter? Good. We need to put these in descending order. Okay. They need to go from the highest degree to the lowest. So since it wasn't in order, we need to reorder them before we can do our factoring by grouping. Okay. Now that we have it reordered, what is the GCF of those first two terms? 8s squared. Left over from 8s squared would be s minus
8.
Yeah.
So cool.
Okay, now here, what are we gonna factor out? +1, so length. Okay, but now we've created our GCF of S minus 8. So we'll factor that out, and left over is 8S squared plus 1.
What happens if they don't match?
Then we can't do this.
Let's see.
Mhm. Mhm. No,
Will it ever happen?
not yet.
What happens?
I have somebody out. You acting like that is not gonna help. I'm not gonna give you ones that can't be factored. Okay, now I want you to go ahead and turn back to that first page we were on, this one right here. Okay. We have now learned all of the methods that we need to know in order to factor in Algebra 1. Okay, so we're gonna start throwing all of them together at the same time. So, in order to be able to factor, you must always look for the GCF first. So you need to ask yourself, is there a GCF? If there's not a GCF, then we can move on. If there is a GCF, you're gonna factor it out, and then you're gonna move on. So we have 3 different options here. Okay, if there are 2 terms, is it a difference of squares? We know that a squared minus b squared factors to a plus b times a minus b. If there are 3 terms, then it's a trinomial. Okay, and you need to do what we basically call unfoiling. Okay, that's what we've worked on for the past how many days? Okay. If there are 4 terms, what method do we have? The one we just learned, factor by grouping. Okay, but you cannot do any of those methods without checking for a GCF first. Number 1, is there a GCF? If there's one, factor that baby out. Once that's factored out, then we can continue. If there's not a GCF, then you just go straight to one of those methods. Okay. So if you did not do your homework over the weekend and you did not practice the difference of squares, that's something you're probably going to want to do before starting tonight's homework. Okay. Now, we are going to go to the next page, this page 243, and we're going to look at a couple of these problems. Okay. Using that flow chart that we just did, we always have to look for a GCF first before we can move forward. In number 9, is there a GCF?
Yeah.
4C is a GCF.
It is.
So we need to factor out that GCF of 4C, and left over would be C squared minus 1. No. Why not? What do you notice about C squared minus 1? It is in parentheses. How many terms is there? How many terms are there? There are how many terms? Inside the parentheses. There are 2 terms. 2 terms that are being subtracted. So go to your flow chart. 2 terms. Does it look like A squared minus B squared? Yeah. This doesn't look like A squared minus B squared? What's 1 squared?
1 squared is 1. Yes.
1 squared is 1. And C squared is C squared. So this is a difference of squares that we can factor to C plus 1, C minus 1. If there's 2 terms, check to see if it's a difference of squares. Try that again. Are you ready?
No.
Let's try number 10. I have faith in us. Okay. Is there a GCF? 25 x squared, and left over would be 4x squared minus 1. Okay, so we factored out our GCF. That was our first step. Now with what's left over, we need to decide if we can factor that. How many terms? 2. Is it a difference of squares? Yes. Okay, good. We can recognize it. This is 2x minus 1, 2x plus 1. It's a difference of squares where 2x squared minus 1 squared. Because it's going to help us when we solve.
Go birds.
Okay. Now, in number 11, is there a GCF?
No.
So if there is not a GCF, then we go straight to the next options. How many terms are there? 3. So now we get to just start figuring out our unfoil. Okay. Well, what's going to be our first product? This right here. So 2A and A.
Sure.
All right. We need our last product to be a -2. But we need O plus I to be negative or positive 3A. 1 and 2. -1 plus 2. So then we have -1A and plus 4A. Is that going to work? Yeah. Yeah, it will. If you don't check to make sure the GCF is factored out first, like number 13, if you just start going like this and try, you're gonna have a heck of a time. In number 13, you better be factoring out the GCF of 2. I mean, it's not a big one, but it's something, okay? Before you continue. Okay, your homework is